Hello and welcome. It's Chris from ChristopherHole.com and welcome to this week's whiteboard where we're going to be talking about healthy eating. We're going to be looking at counting calories and calculating macros. Now, macros is a bit of a fitness industry term, but what it basically means is macronutrients, so your carbohydrates, your fats, and your proteins. So we're going to be looking at that around healthy eating. The aim of the video is to be able to read and interpret food labels a bit better, so we're able to eat that much more healthy, and that's not only the quality of the food that we're eating, but also the quantity of the food we're eating, i.e. The calories and the macronutrients that we're talking about today. Two objectives is to understand food labeling terminology, and the second one is to understand food labeling tolerances, because if we are counting calories and counting our macros, there is one part of food labeling that in a sense makes that process flawed. So counting calories and counting macros is in some way flawed, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So this isn't necessarily a presentation to talk about how to do it more accurately or how to do it better. It's more an educational process to help you understand what the food label is actually saying rather than what's written on the label. Because there's a few bits that a lot of coaches don't know. I've stood up in front of personal trainers, rooms of personal trainers, 20, 30 people in the room, and I will educate them on this subject, and they'll look shocked. And it's not, I don't see it as a shocking thing, because as I talk about it more, you'll understand why. It's just a process of the way things are labelled. So that's what we're going to talk about in this presentation. But just a quick piece of business before we do get started. Just want to mention my social media, which is on Twitter at Christopher Hole, Christopher Hole Training on Facebook, and Christopher Hole on Instagram. So if you want to come to along to any of those, like and follow. I'm posting videos like this and blogs, anything under the health and fitness umbrella, be it exercise, nutrition, or behavior. I'm posting on any of these three social media platforms, so please do come along, like and follow. It would be great to see you there. Alternatively, come to ChristopherHole.com. Obviously, I've got the blog on there where you can read and watch more of these videos about, again, anything health and fitness. Got a newsletter, which is a more specific way of learning about this. I share exclusive content. I've some recent content and also recipes and exercises of the month and things like that. So if you want to come along to those, please do come along, sign up to the newsletter. It'd be great to have you on board. So back to today's whiteboard, where we're talking about healthy eating, counting calories, and calculating macros or macronutrients. So going on to slide number 1. What we've got is, this is a picture I took of one of the little sort of oats porridge bowls or tubs that are sold in the UK. And then I've just got another food label here, which is again from the Quakers or Quaker.co.uk, which is the same branded product as this hot oat cereal and soy protein product, as you can read at the top there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what this food label is actually saying, because what we've got on here, if you can read here, you've got typical nutritional information, and it's very important, those words, typical nutrition information. The most important word of that is typical, because what we've got down here on this nutrition label, which is nutritional claims. Now, what I'm basically getting at is these food labels aren't as accurate as you might think they are, or they aren't, let's just say, telling the absolute truth. They are telling you ballpark figures and estimations. Now, I've done a previous video on calories, and all calories are calculated. It's all done in a database, but it's all calculated via an estimate. So all of these numbers, so your calories, your fats, your carbohydrates, your proteins, everything is all done via an estimate. And what they do, more so with the fats, carbohydrates, fiber, protein, salt, is those are done with a 20% margin of error, or tolerance as they call it, which is I'm going to come on to in the next slide. So what we have to understand is that these food labels aren't as accurate as you think. Now, that's not done to mislead you. Although they don't tell you the whole truth, they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes, because if you think about the mass production of food and how that's done, there is no way they could accurately calculate how much sugar or how much fibre or how much fat is in this pot of porridge. Because if you think it's done in a big, 1,000-litre container, and it's all getting mixed up. So it's all getting mixed up, and then all these individual pots are just getting bits poured into it. So where it says 54 grams, that's probably the only accurate part of it. With regards to the soy protein that's in it, or the milk powder, or the sugar, or the oats, they're going to fluctuate, and they're allowed to fluctuate by 20%. So 20% more or 20% less. Because it depends on whereabouts everything is sitting in this big vat or container where all the ingredients are kept. And this is the same for all foods. I'm just using porridge, or this tub of porridge, as the example. But what we have to understand is, if we are going to be monitoring what we're eating and eating healthier, we can't just follow the food labels. Yes, I do agree that they will give you a good ballpark figure and a good place to start from, but it's not necessarily the most accurate. So, when you talk about, you're eating, 50 calories too many a day, or one bar of chocolate has got 30 grams of sugar in it, or whatever it might be, those types of things aren't that accurate. Yes, they're a good ballpark figure, but they're not absolutely accurate. So what this brings me on to is the actual piece of documentation where this was all stated. Now, this comes from the European Commission, and I'll show you the reference on the next slide, and where you can sort of find it. But basically, Table 1 is tolerances for food other than food supplements, including measurement uncertainty. So you can see here, you've got carbohydrates, sugars, proteins, and fibre. You've got a 20% tolerance, plus or minus. So it could be 20% more, or it could be 20% less. It all depends on, how it falls out of the container that it's all being made within. And then what you've got here are some examples of what it could and should be, if that makes sense. So according to rounding guidelines of Section 6, this equals to 8.45 to 8.54 grams of sugar per 100. So you can see there's some tolerances, plus or minus. So lower tolerances, lower values, 8.45 minus lower tolerance of sugar from Section 3, which is 2 grams, equals 6.45 grams. So the lower limit would be 6.45 grams per 100 grams. The upper limit would be 10.54 grams per 100 grams. So if you've got a food label saying 8.5 grams of sugar, it could be 6.45 to 10.54 grams of sugar per that food product. Now, this is the same for soft drinks. Now, soft drinks, a can of soft drink will notoriously contain about 30 grams of sugar. So that could be as high as 33, or it could be, 20%. So it could be as high as 36, or it could be as low as 24 grams. So we don't know exactly what's in there, but we do have our ballpark figure with a plus or minus 20% tolerance to it. And that's the same for salt, or sodium, which is essentially salt, fats, which is monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, and you've obviously got fats there as well, carbohydrates, sugar, protein, fibre, minerals, and vitamins. So there's the table that it actually came from. So with all of this said, what's my advice? Is to keep a food diary. Just keep tracking what you're eating. So if you are monitoring what you're eating and how much you're eating, keep a food diary, number one. Because what you may just find is that you're eating, and then you may just think, not even weighing food, not even calculating calories or macronutrients, you'll just think, well, I'm eating too much, or I'm not eating enough, just because you're writing down what you're eating. what you can then start to do is just weigh the food that you're eating. So don't worry about the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats. Just weigh the food that you're eating so you get a good idea of how much of the volume and mass of food that you're eating. This is just a place to start. If you then want to go on to counting calories and calculating your macronutrients, what you have to understand is that all calories are done via an estimate, and all sort of food nutrition is done via a 20% margin of tolerance. So when you're looking at a food label and reading it off an app or just reading a food label, it could be higher and it could be lower. So when you're taking your sort of daily calories, again, that could be 20% higher, or it could be 20% lower. You just don't know. So it's very much focusing on just monitoring what you're eating. Are you eating too much via the weight that you're doing, and subjectively just looking at what you're writing down on the piece of paper and how you feel, and then making your first judgment from that, because the calories and the gram values aren't accurate on the food labels, or they might not be accurate on the food label. The second thing is to eat a whole food plant-based diet. Now again, that doesn't mean only plant foods, but base your diet on that. If you want to have 10% of animal products or 20% of animal products, that's not going to do as much harm as the typical Western diet, which is a lot more animal product and your token 5 fruit and veg a day. What we want to be focusing on is much more whole food plant-based diet. And I know some people will argue that. That's absolutely fine. But consistently over the 50 to 60 years that nutrition science has been sort of conducted, a plant-based whole food diet has always come out as the most healthiest. So, argue all you like, the research is there, and that's cool. The fourth one is drink plenty of water. So making sure you're drinking plenty of water, not tea, not coffee, not juices, but just drinking plenty of water first. All of that other stuff, all the animal foods, all the confectionaries, all the juices and everything else, and the teas and the coffees, they should wrap around these two principles of eating a whole food, plant-based diet and drinking plenty of water. That should take up most of it, and then everything else just kind of wraps around, just filling in the gaps, if that makes sense. With regards to the reference where I got this information from, that's the title of it. So if you want to look that up and have a read through it, it's an interesting read. It talks to you more about the tolerances. It talks to you more about food labels and the legislation that goes around food labeling and nutrition labeling. Not only what can go on the back of the packet, i.e. the nutritional information, but also the marketing terminology on the front of the packaging. So yeah, please do have a read of that and you'll be able to get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So hopefully that's been helpful for you. Hopefully it's given you a better insight into food, into nutrition, into healthy eating, and also into calorie counting and the counting of macros and macronutrients. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from ChristopherHole.com. I'll speak to you in the next video.